I'm Pixie Lighthorse, and I'm here representing the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I have with me Spring Alaska Schreiner, and we're just very grateful to AGC for hosting this day-long event. We're coming to you from the lands of the Northern Paiute, the Desert People, also the salmon lands of Warm Springs, Wasco, who am I forgetting? Warm Springs, Wasco. They have Nez Perce up there at the Warm Springs Res as well. These lands that we live on were ceded in the Treaty of 1855. And of course, those treaties would not hold up. So the so-called Oregon land that we live on is stolen land, whose state ship incarcerated original peoples on reservations and disrupted their seasonal rounds of stewarding, foraging, harvesting, making food camps along the riverways. I cooperate a small restorative beef herd here. My neighbor, Spring Alaska Schreiner, is here representing her farm, Sakari Farm. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Spring?
Yes, thank you everyone for having me. I just want to thank A Growing Culture, some of my peers and mentors that I'll be teaching with today, Dave and Rowan White and Sean Sherman. I'm so excited to be surrounded by all my peers that have gotten me to this place today. And Pixie, of course, has been a great mentor and friend, really kind of helping push me towards the light kind of, so I'm very thankful for that. Hello, Miigwech, for having me. My name is Hugh Pinkstrak. That's my Nubyak name. It means time in the ice breaks. I'm the owner of Sakari Farms. We house the Sakari Botanicals, which is our tribal food business. We make value-added products from the farm, from the food that we grow here on the farm. And I also host the Sakari Farms Tribal Seed Bank. So we really focus on trying to increase tribal seed production, some of our ancestral seeds that we receive from around the country with permission from other tribes gifting it to us. We also teach tribal food cooking classes through NAF grants and other Oregon Farm to School grants. We've got a lot going on the farm. It's a beautiful piece of property that we actually purchased 2 or 3 years ago. It was kind of left in shambles, so it's been a real joy to be able to start from scratch and use some of our practices, sustainable kind of practices of cover crops. I'm trying to get our soil healthy enough with this odd climate we have here in our sandy loam soils, which is really difficult to grow, and you're constantly amending your soils to try and get them healthy enough to grow food in as you work with challenges of the climate and the crazy weather that we have. So that's just kind of a quick intro of what Sakari Farms is. Feels good to finally own property instead of leasing. I've been leasing in different areas around Deschutes County for about 10 years farming. So everyone's always kind of like, oh, you're new to farming. I'm like, no, we actually just have our own land to finally work with. So I'm not running around with my head cut off, driving all over the county trying to grow lavender, different native crops and seeds. So I'm very honored to have our own place to work at and kind of take care of this property again, because of course we were on tribal lands. The people before us kind of trashed it. And so it's been a joy every year to watch it continually thrive and be more productive for us.
Yeah, it was beautiful to help harvest Hopi Red Amaranth just about a month or so ago with my children on your ground there. I want to ask you to share why you grow indigenous seed and what that process looks like as a seed keeper and seed grower and returner of seed to tribal nations.
I guess I'll just do a quick going backwards is my background in college was natural resource management, and I focused when I got out in mine reclamation and stream hydrology. So I really have a passion for clean water, fish habitat, and wetland plants, and any native aquatics. So when I was doing that work, we were growing a lot of plants for the river restoration projects, planting them. And just, I was always gathering a lot of native seed and then always trying to increase that by regrowing it. And then when I moved to Oregon from Colorado doing that work, there wasn't a lot of that opportunity to do that work here. So I started my own native plant nursery called Deschutes Native Seed Resources. I noticed there was a demand or just no native seed here. There was a few small operators, but most of the native seed was coming from Idaho for restoration purposes, Montana. So I just started growing my own seed, and then by growing the plant too, I noticed that these are some of the traditional plants that we gathered in Alaska, where I'm from: yarrow, rose hips, different high altitude plants that I was bringing down from the mountains to grow. So I'd had more access to food instead of having to go up into wilderness areas where it's illegal. And that's a whole nother food code thing we can probably get into some other time. But the seed, it's important for me to grow seed because there wasn't any around. There's no access. And as a hunter-gatherer culture that I'm from, my tribe, which many are, and we often supplement with farming, is I just needed to be around it as much as I could. So just growing it myself. And then once we bought the farm and I had started doing more traditional native work and being introduced to the Indian Intertribal Ag Council and First Nations development, then I finally kind of was like, oh, there's a need for it nationally, or where are all my tribal peeps here in Deschutes County? So that's where I got my groove on, kind of to start shelling out more seed kind of and growing it. And then it just became, there's a big need for it. There's no tribal food around here in Deschutes County specifically that is farmed. There's a lot of gathering to do, but I wanted to make it, I wanted to lower the amount of disturbance forest too by non-natives gathering, which we're having issues with right now with elderberries specifically. I went out to get them this year and there really weren't any. I'm going to take climate change to be in drought, a little bit of that, but there's just a lot of factors that came into it where there just wasn't any seed around. So the way I've always worked here in Deschutes County is if I see demand for something, I try and fill it. And it's been pretty successful each time I've tried something, whether it be the Central Oregon Seed Exchange. There wasn't any local seed for the non-oak. So just everything I've tried, I just continue to watch it grow. And that's kind of where the need for seed is just there isn't any. And so there needs to be more.
Yeah. Do you want to share what kind of seed varieties you do grow? I've seen a lot of it, but those watching don't know what you're growing.
Super fun. Yeah, I also, before I was introduced to working with more tribal members nationally, I started growing for Native Seed Search, and I work with Noah now, and we have a really good friend relationship. I met him at the Organic Seed Conference this year, and they have a big need for growing seed where there's shortages around the country. So I've just been growing a lot of his stuff, which is really fun. It's a lot of intertribal seed collectives that have been sent to him, and I grow that seed out. So it'd be like Hopi blue corn, azafran, which is our native saffron, but it's a safflower. A variety of amaranths. I feel bad that Hopi red just gets all the exposure because there's plume and verde and different nutritional values associated with all those different seed types.
She's just so it's all the glory.
Yeah, it really is. I like the plume and the verde though, because it's green. It's really pretty. Tomatillos, different peppers, tribal garlic. We have a beautiful garlic. We're, I think, on year 3 of growing out that we redistribute also nationally to tribal members. There's a few native plants, different kinds of yarrows, different wildflowers that are considered wildflowers, but there are native plants, they're perennials. So just a variety of different foods. Squashes we're attempting. It's really tough where we live in this little pocket to grow any kind of emotional, high maintenance, very needy plant, but it's so high nutritional value. Let me grab the one we did grow this year. It is this big. It's a little melon. It's a tribal melon. We're really excited to pop it open and see if we can save any of the seed from it. But what happens with me traditionally, and a lot of seed keepers, I think, is that when you go to these different conferences and we're with our peers and someone's got, 6 Hopi black beans and you're like, oh yeah, I'll grow those out. And then this year with our climate issues we had, we might've gotten 20. So it's, seed keeping and regrowing as an Indigenous farmer, especially in Central Oregon. My husband reminded me this morning that we have 50 to 60 days of growing season, but we start in February and we ended, this week. So there's a lot involved. It's really hard here in Central Oregon to grow seed. I wish sometimes I was in the Midwest where it just happens. So there's a lot of hard work there too, but it's really hard to grow seed here. So it takes a long time as an Indigenous farmer. And I think that goes back to some of the old ways too, is that tribal members were not in a hurry. There's not instant gratification. We're always learning from our weather. The climate is always telling us the spirit of what the moon, the wind is always dictating how our plants grow, how our seasons change. And so this is not a rush to get the paycheck. You don't have to, I personally don't scramble to try and find any way I can make money. I'm sticking to Indigenous farming. We started off with value-added products and we'll continue with that, and by creating new recipes with this valuable seed that we're able to grow. If I am not able to grow seed, a lot of my Indigenous chefs, Elena, Terry, and Rosebud they just visited and brought me some seed. Becky Webster from Oneida donated. So it was really cool to have my friends support me by sharing the seed, and it all goes right back to them. So it's a really good feeling, but it is challenging here working with 3 to 5 seeds at a time. Sometimes we tried this year, we had almost 135 varieties of different plants, most native. So we're kind of still trying to figure it out. It's definitely a seed production farm, education farm. So yeah.
COVID prevented us from doing our seed cleaning and seed keeping class this year, which is sad. There's been some sorrow with our hailstorm that destroyed some of your crops earlier in the season. Was that in April, May?
It was like right before Memorial Day, like May 29th or something like that.
Yeah, thank goodness for the greenhouse. I want to ask you if you want to talk a little bit about any other challenges that you face as an Indigenous farmer. Obviously, no one, unless you're corporatizing your farm, no one's farming. You know, we farm for love, not for glory or money. It's a relatively thankless job. I'm so happy to see Indigenous farmers, you know, really rising up and being recognized and seen, standing under your crop of Apache sunflower and watching them go to the drying screens and things like that is, it's like, I don't know, it's spirit food. It's very special to witness you growing over there. But what are some of the other challenges that you face as an Indigenous farmer? I think that folks don't understand and don't really grok the, we have these movements like the regenerative movement, you know, Kiss the Ground has just had this, you know, put out this big film, and we have people like Farmers Footprint that I'm constantly trying to hold accountable because it's very corporate and institutionalized agriculture, and it's got a really positive sort of impact that it could make, but it's very frustrating as an Indigenous farmer to look at the hoops that you have to jump through and the bureaucracy when, you know, we're just wanting to grow food and seed here. So the regenerative movement, while it's got its sights set on a lot of you know, restoring lands, many of us tiny farmers out here are doing that anyway, and there's not a lot of recognition isn't what any Indigenous person I know is looking for, but there's not a lot of media sharing that this is actually happening all over the place in, you know, the so-called United States, all over Turtle Island, where we're growing seed and growing food in a traditional way and restoring the soil and restoring the land and using less water and all of these kinds of things. So what would you say is along those lines is a challenge for you?
I mean, just to talk about the the movie stars making movies and you know, making it glamorous to farm, or I haven't seen the movie yet, but I can just, they all seem to be the same. I'm glad that there's more movies about farming, so I'm just going to give that, you know, side to it. It encourages everyone to farm, but seeing the non-native, you know, dressing up in a very expensive cowboy hat and, you know, $300 Patagonia bid, like there's this scene to farming, at least here in Central Oregon, it's pretty hipster. And then them using that as PR to profit from that. Oh my gosh, I'm using cover crops and I'm using native plants, not a restore where my cattle are still grazing. That's not good either. You know, it's like this scene, and you had asked me before we got on to talk about it, and I just try and stay out of it too, because I don't think about what we're doing. I just do it because that's what I was taught. And those are tribal practices. Those are old historical practices we use. When we don't have a fire ban, pretty soon in the next few weeks, hopefully when they drop that, we can start using burning mechanisms and practices like the old ways. I don't have a lot to say about it. It's pretty controversial, but some of the challenges that I have was when I was leasing land around the county, it's kind of a pain to have to give your tribal corn seed or some of your really sensitive tribal plants that have a lot of ancestral ties to them, to set them out in a 1/4 acre field when that's someone else's land. I have big trust issues because there were people coming and taking, I just grabbed one of those for my mom for Thanksgiving on our table, or I took a bunch of pictures and took some seed if that's okay. And it's hard when people, they come and do that here at the farm too. And I'm just like, okay, like I'm not really good at saying no. I seem pretty sassy on the outside, but just really nice all the time, just kind of push over. But one of the challenges I saw growing leasing land was that I didn't trust where my seed was at. And now having my own land that I'm taking care of, that all the seed is together, and I feel like they're happier that way because it feels like this big tribal family of all this ancestral seed. Like it's really nice to have it all together. One of my biggest challenges was being raised low income and poverty, and I still stayed in that pocket, that colonialism term pocket, since I've lived here up until a few years ago. Food stamps, single mom, rushing all over to get things done and grow this food, is that there's a lot of competition here to farm. All the non-native girls seem to think that there isn't, because they're the ones doing well and you don't see challenges when you're kind of at the top, but it seems like everyone's at the top kind of. So one of my biggest challenges was funding. We took out a massive mortgage to get the property. We took out and are still struggling with FSA constantly. Took out a microloan to get infrastructure and equipment. I have a tribal keep seagull loan through a Keepton, which is awesome, to get the greenhouse. I just took out a small business loan through COVID to get another greenhouse because it's very competitive getting grants here. And I'm really exhausted and tired of trying to be recognized for farming, whether it's native or not. It's just, I think it's because I am always doing policy work and challenging the system locally to encourage them to bring in more realistic education. It's just, I'm kind of on the boo-boo list there, but because we're in debt all the time, it's harder to compete, to grow. It's harder to have the funds to just crank out all this produce, and that's what the competition is here. Everyone is growing the same food. If I post something on Instagram now, so there's another trust issue I have, which I have to stop. If I do post something that we're growing that's unique, the only time the farmers talk to me, oh, what is that? Oh, no, and that's not okay.
It's real.
They turn around and grow it, and they're using it in flower bouquets, or they're not asking. I don't know, it's just, there's a lot going on and it's really stressful, and I call it crisis farming this year, especially. There's no reason that it has to be complete chaos for somebody to enter farming when they have to go into debt, and then you have to enter the market of competition. And with COVID, the people that normally sell to restaurants were overtaking that small farmer's little stand that we couldn't sell to. So we basically lost the food we did grow this year. It was just a loss, so I donated most of it. Yeah, the crisis farming has to stop, and that's the challenge that I have, is just constantly pulling on someone's shirt to be like, can I be in the group too? Can I be recognized? Am I getting pushed away because I'm too strong and too engaged? Like, that's ridiculous too, because it's just education. And I was talking to Elena and Rosebud too about growing seed and tribal members sharing seed. It shouldn't be a competition because it's free. We don't sell our tribal seed. We're sharing our ancestral pathways, intertribal trade routes. It seems competitive sometimes in the non-native world. Than a lot of the natives I work with are my friends and peers and mentors, and they're so supportive. When I go to tribal conferences, and I don't want to come home because I come home and no one cares, I have to tug on the shirts again. And then it's this backpedaling of like, Oh, like the recent thing that happened to me was because of this, there's been some local concerns about non-natives doing tribal work. It got pretty nasty, and what I was seeing out of that, it was a backpedaling movement of someone had said in agency that they didn't know I was doing native work until recently because they saw me dressed up like one. So that's hard for me because I don't look as native as my other peers. I am half German and half Inupiaq, so it's not my fault, but I'm a chief's daughter, so I do have permission to do this work. It's my role in my tribe to do this work. I have siblings that don't care about it. They just are doing their thing, and I'm the one that has been picked to do the healing work, the medicine work, and the plant work. And that is something that's going to continue with the leadership roles that I've been gifted. They're challenging, but I didn't ask for it. It's something that I'm seem to be okay at and learning about and being good at. But those are the challenges: is competition, recognition. I don't need a gold star all the time, but just trying to get a little bit of funding sometimes to get things going. We're not subsidized for the tribal food boxes we donate. We're not subsidized for our tribal food cooking classes or the seed bank. I know that there's other tribal farmers that are cranking out a lot of tribal seed, but there's just got to be a way that it's more economically sustainable for us because we're so loan dependent.
Yeah.
But I don't want the poor me factor to be engaged there either. So I can go on all day about the challenges.
I see it as like we're still sort of straddling that colonial model of, needing funding in a certain way. You and I talk a lot about like who gets the grants and why isn't it on folks' radars, some of our local nonprofits, some of our university systems, why isn't it on their radars to be like, hey, I see you're an Indigenous farmer and we have grants available. And that when you say that to white folks, they're like, we're all out here hustling for grants, and that's just what you have to do to get the gravy. And I'm like, that's not what I have time for. We're restoring soil and native grasses out here and tending our herd, and in no particular, supremacy style hurry to build brands. We can't sell our beef to restaurants because we don't comply with we hand harvest in field, and so we don't comply with USDA standards, and so we have a very small operation here, so we wouldn't be able to meet the demand of that anyway. But the top-down structure is something that I'm constantly trying to wrap my own head around and talk to others about, where you've got this sort of like pyramid scheme, which describes America. And you've got this sort of layer of people we pay taxes as business people and fund the top. And yet there's still sort of this like trickle down into charity model. I really liked what Vanessa said earlier about solidarity, not charity. Like even the notion of donating to tribal food boxes, if it's handled in a way that is like, my family got commodities and gleaners and things like that when I was a kid. Yeah. And so, there's a strange, I don't want to call it a shame, but it's just like this is what we're dealing with in so many different areas of our social structures right now, is why do we have this strata where farmers, food growers, are fighting for sovereignty? I also wanted to ask you just to speak for a moment on the co-opting of food sovereignty by non-native farmers. That's something you and I have kind of touched on a little bit. Like that's an Indigenous thing. So that like the taking and the purloining of those terms, when they're not fully understood, is obviously an irritant for those of us who are striving for sovereignty.
Yeah, I'll get in trouble again, but it just bothers me, and I don't want to speak for anyone on Turtle Island, but I don't know. Here locally, there's a lot of hashtagging, and again, using some of our terms and our practices for PR and profit. using hashtag food sovereignty on a non-native farm, it feels like it's our term because there's a lot of historical trauma attached that we're all healing from still. Everyone's got a different level of that. Lack of culture, cultural genocide. My daughter, her genetics, her tribal genes are being narrowed down because I married, another, or had her with a white person. So like, we're struggling to try and bring back our nativeness, and having someone use our terms for them to get more credibility for or profit. And those are all the farmers at the top still that are, it's like, do you really need to use that term? You're already doing very well. So that's just something that's bothering me. Or when they hashtag seed sovereignty, I'm just kind of like, I just lost the whole field. There is no seed sovereignty this year. It's really difficult to just watch them continue to use our terms and phrases. And another thing I want to bring up is like, we've been here the whole time. And it's because there's a new awareness of racial issues. It's been great to be recognized, but it's been tremendously stressful. To answer everyone's questions. You and I talk about all of a sudden everyone wants answers on what we need, and over gifting things, or because of COVID, everyone's running up to help tribes. It's like, we've been here the whole time. The problems have been the same. They might continue to be the same. Let's just not use this as a PR movement. Let's just continue to honor the people around us and kind of work with them instead of work. It's just constant pushback with me. I'm never,
as you said, a lot of competition.
Yeah.
And I had a little thought there about,
I've got a thought too about something before we get, let me just throw this in there before we run out of time. I heard somebody, I was watching this really cool chef show with my husband the other night, and I heard something really cool. People see what they want to be. And it made me think about, being raised poor and you end up poor. So what I'm trying to do with the farm and the work that I've done and will continue to do, and with my daughter too, is that I lead by example, realistic examples. It's taken me 10 years to get this thing up and running, but I want to show some of these young girls too, and women, tribal members that want to be chefs and educators and farmers, or do any kind of entrepreneurialism work, is that if I can do it, coming from the very bottom, we're still in tremendous debt, but we love what we're doing. We're happy. We work really hard every day. But if I can do it, they can do it too. What else was I going to say? And that we elevate the foods that we're familiar with. So I'm trying to I hate that we have to reintroduce our foods these days. It's 2020, but we're finally getting our fire back under our feet, and it feels safer to do it. But I want to grow these foods so that we can make those associations. The more food we have, the healthier our tribal communities are going to be, the healthier your social lifestyle will be. You're going to hopefully, go into something healthy that utilizes your time in a better way than going out and drinking and partying when you're young. Hopefully you're working on a farm, or we can start to mentor people. We're trying to raise funds right now to get a tribal intern out here next year, or just hire somebody so that they can continue to learn and get that enthusiasm. So that's just my little pitch I had before we get off, is that I want people to know that it takes a while. It's great to see other women such as yourself farming too, because I don't feel so alone, but we need more of us out there, and
I know
there's a lot of work to do. It shouldn't be competitive. So yeah, there's that. Anything else?
I'm just really grateful. I support wholeheartedly youth, as you do too. Getting around the children is so special for both of us, and I can see it. It's family to me to be on your farm and have my children there, and just to be able to be in each other's presence, to have one another in solidarity as we start to flesh out what our goals are as Indigenous farmers.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yakoki.
Yeah, thank you.